All right. Well, welcome everybody to Rightpoint Presents Long Story Short Women in Design Edition. We're really happy to be part of the 10th annual Detroit Design Month presented by Design Core Detroit. And there's been a lot of really interesting events going on. I hope you've had a chance to take advantage of them. And we're really excited to be part of actually starting the final weekend. My name is Alice Coleman, and I'm a design director, and I lead the design team of Rightpoint's Detroit office. And for those of you not familiar with Rightpoint, we're a customer experience agency, and we're headquartered in Chicago, and we've got 9 offices in the U.S., including one in Royal Oak, and then there's a few others in India, Europe, and Australia. So we're really excited to be partnering with Design Core on this. I've been familiar with Design Core for a while, and I've attended several events that they've had. And we became partner members with them earlier this year. And one of the reasons that we're really excited about it is that it really gives us opportunities to deepen our relationship with the design community in and around Detroit. And we're really excited to bring you this event. And really to go through and talk for you to hear from a group of female design leaders across various facets of the industry. And they're going to share a story with you related to curiosity. So why this event? I have worked in advertising and design for most of my career, and I love what I do, and I've loved almost every aspect that got me here. And when I say almost every aspect, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't call out that while I'm used to being in spaces where I'm the only woman and or only Black person, I've just become accustomed to it. But that doesn't mean that that's the way that it should be. And one thing I've realized over time is that I've been really lucky in my career. I've had the fortune of working for and with some really amazing female design leaders, and that's been crucial to my growth overall. So recently, not that long ago, I came across a statistic that said there's about an even split when you look at women and men in the design industry. And the mediums and platforms that they took into account was pretty broad. But then it went on to say that when you look at leadership, the split becomes 89% male and 11% female. And other underrepresented groups are just that, woefully underrepresented. And when I look back, that holds true to what I've experienced in my career, but it made me curious about why is that? First, why such the stark difference when it comes to leadership? Then wondering, does the lack of representation itself become almost a self-fulfilling prophecy? And then finally, how can we start to address the disparity? So this event is an opportunity to start a dialogue around this subject and hear how some of these design leaders think and what has spurred them on in their careers. And they'll do it through stories. And I think, stories are a powerful means of sharing experiences and passing them down. And it's important that we pass them along to others to learn and be inspired from. And a good story can inspire and delight, and that's what we're going to hear tonight. So our subject this evening is curiosity. We went through quite a few options, but kept coming back to it. And to me, it's a key driver of creators and makers. And it took a while for me to come around to the word curiosity, though. And that's mostly, if I'm being honest, because of Curious George. And I feel like he gave the word a bad rap, because when I used to think about curiosity, I thought of it as being more of meddling, a meddling pest, than it being a burning desire of wanting to do and learn more. A push and a pull, a natural tension between finding something out and thinking, now that's interesting, what else? How else? And the people who are curious seem to have a sparkle. I think we'll all agree on that. And that's what I've seen and connected with in these ladies. They have at different points in my career been a sounding board, a colleague, a friend, inspiration. They're good at their craft, and they're also exceptional humans. And I think to be really successful, you have to be both. I'm really excited for them to tell us the story this evening. And this is how the evening's gonna go. We have 4 storytellers, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. And when we get there, we'll ask you to put your questions in the chat. But is everybody ready? to get started? Okay. So our first storyteller is Aruna Mall. And Aruna and I worked together many years ago when she was just out of college. Back then, we were designing and developing websites for an agency called Enlighten. And I remember that we had an almost instant connection. And over the years, our paths kind of crossed with overlapping friendships, like work and personal. But we hadn't talked until I reached out to ask her about this event, and it was like no time had passed at all. So Aruna is going to be introduced by Juliana Hamilton tonight, and Juliana is a visual designer on our team here in Detroit. So Juliana, I'm not sure how you take and become the present or the focus. Are you there?
That's okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
I can just introduce this way if that's okay. Alice introduced Aruna and I last week, and we got to chat, and I got to know a little bit about her background and where she works now. We talked a little bit about how she got into design. She found a blog about a woman web designer who worked for Gap, and she just found it to be really beautiful, and that's how she found that combination of technical and artistic aesthetic into a career. And I thought that was super interesting. Right now she's a creative director at Teal, and she leads the design team there. Teal is a design agency that does work for nonprofits and advocacy organizations such as Greenpeace and Time's Up. I took a look at their work after talking with Aruna, and it's really beautiful and impactful. We chatted about how she's found intuition to be really central to not only her life, but also her career. And I'm really excited to hear about her story and how that connects with curiosity.
Thank you. That was such a nice introduction from both of you. Hi, everyone. I'm Aruna Mall. Thank you for showing up on this awesome Friday fall evening. It doesn't feel like fall, but like the others mentioned, my story revolves around curiosity, but it really allowing to feed one of my greatest tools that I feel like I have as a leader, which is my intuition. I truly feel that women specifically have this in loads, and over again in my career, I've been met with these moments where I knew in my gut what the right move was, or the direction I should be going, or the decision that I needed to make, and I could feel it. But I didn't always respect it. What I have found in growing in my career is that curiosity has helped me use this muscle and make it stronger. And now I do rely on it constantly to either lead my design team or guide the creative decisions that need to be made or collaborate with clients. It, of course, wasn't always this way. As a woman in the design field, and especially as a woman of color and as an immigrant where English was not my first language, I have had many moments, obviously, of self-doubt or, imposter syndrome, or that unsolicited advice of, should you do this? Should you be doing this? Even, as early as college, as Juliana was saying, I was really inspired by, when Alta Vista blogs were the big thing. I made a blog, and this other, it was about music, and, it looked pretty cool, I thought. But there was a woman who was a designer for Gap, a web designer, and her blog just was very simple and very clean and very different looking than an Alta Vista blog. And I was so inspired by the look and the words and the content, and it really it sparked something in me, and it really made me shift what I wanted to do. And, a lot of people in my life, close friends, my parents, people were like, did you really think you should go into design? Either it's really competitive, can you really make money? The classic immigrant parent, you sure you don't just want to be a doctor or a lawyer, that thing. But I knew that it was for me. It really connected with me, this connection of design and obviously the online world, and I dove right in. And so throughout my career and being at different agencies, that intuition has been the thread, but there is one specific moment that really gave me so much clarity on why intuition is so meaningful to me. And I do think back at that moment, not often, but I do think back on it, and it kind of grounds me when I do have bigger moments where I need to really rely on my intuition. And so that kind of specific moment is what I'll talk about, so in the summer of 2007, I got a random email from a lead constructor of a major presidential bid campaign, and they needed a design lead in Chicago. And I'm sure you can guess who that is, but at the moment I didn't know who it was, and they couldn't tell me over email, and they were like, we want to talk right away. You know, they were just, in the campaign world, things move so fast. And, you know, we had made, you know, even though we had scheduled a time to talk, they called me before that time. So I was super unprepared for the conversation. And, you know, they wanted somebody to come in and lead the look and feel of, you know, Barack Obama's presidential campaign. And, you know, they wanted an answer right away. And I said no. And why did I say no? Well, I was engaged at the time. I was in Michigan, and I felt like, you know, I needed to spend time planning this wedding, and, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to take time to plan your wedding and focus. And while that's, you know, of course, great, I immediately regretted it. That sort of next hour, I just had this sunken feeling. I knew it wasn't right. I knew that it didn't sit right with me. And so what did I do? I did nothing. And then I still did nothing. I didn't email back, didn't get more information. And I regretted not doing anything and not listening to that sinking feeling. And obviously, you know, Barack Obama became president, and you know, that call really was, even though he became president, and that was wonderful, and I would have, you know, loved to have a hand in that. What really left an impression in me was that call was really that first time that I realized designing for social good or for impact was a thing. And I was so excited about it. And that was another intuitive spark in me. And I knew I just had to kind of go down that path because it was meaningful to me. And so coming out of that regret and not doing anything and not listening to my intuition, I really did learn to honor it and to give it a chance and allow curiosity to at least feed that intuition until I had enough information to really ruminate on the thing, gather data. You know, we do this in design. It's our research and discovery phase, but really, you know, I needed to give my intuition that moment to do its thing, for it to work well. And in that moment, I had stopped it. And, you know, I recognized later that I had stopped it. And so lesson learned there, that, you know, I need to give it that time. And so soon thereafter, just because I was inspired by that and it had sparked something in me, I focused my energy in finding an agency or work, you know, whether it's freelance work or just connecting with an agency that did social good, that created work that had an impact on the world. And that I knew that I just had to find my way back to like be involved in that kind of work. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because, you know, in Michigan, let alone, I think out there, there weren't a lot of firms that were specifically focusing on doing work, design work for, you know, just social causes alone and specifically. And so once I had that goal, I was, you know, curious and started scouring and looking for opportunities and being curious about what was out there and who was out there, what work was out there that aligned with my goals. And it was funny, I happened upon a listing for a contractor job, and it was for a small company called Teal Media. And they did that kind of work, branding, website development, you know, creative support retainers for nonprofit and advocacy organizations. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And they were in Detroit. And so it was amazing. I was here, they were here. And so I connected with the founder, Jessica Teal. And in that first call about the designer position, I found out that she was actually the design manager for the Obama campaign. And if I would have taken that position, we would have met and we would have worked closely together and we would have, you know, have done something together. And, you know, coming off of that call, I took that obviously as a huge sign. This is meant to be. You know, it's as if that moment in time that I wished would have happened, it was okay that it didn't happen, because kind of back where I kind of needed to be. And I need to be connected with teal for a long time, long term. It felt really right. So fast forward from 2000, that was 2009. Fast forward to 2020, and my role in my career at teal has been pretty intense learning curve, from being, just a freelance designer to then, being that contractor with them, to being full-time, going on extended maternity leave, to coming back full-time, to then, running the company when Jessica Teal was, she was doing a residency at the White House, at the U.S. Digital Service. So I ran that company. And so it's been a huge learning curve in those years. But what I have relied on is my intuition, and really looking back and to that moment of knowing that I can rely on my intuition. And I've had that privilege of really learning and using that muscle, and growing, teal from 4 employees to 15 full-time now. And we're still growing, and really growing that design team and the practice, and helping shape who we are as a company. And obviously it's just my dream job. If I think back to, my vegan loving, protesting activisty college person, if I imagine this is what I would be doing, I'd be super, super proud. Obviously we work in incredible organizations that really work tirelessly on their missions, especially now. But throughout those intense growth professionally and personally, big moments like that help define a career, they're incredible to have experienced. I feel lucky to have experienced something like that, to have that happen to me, that sort of serendipity coming full circle. But I truly believe that in careers, and in our careers, and in my day-to-day moments, there's these micro moments that I use my intuition for on a daily basis. And I continue to use that muscle, and those moments being things around how we interact with, our team members, how we define the culture within our workspace, what kind of work do we want to put out there, how we interact with the clients, or lead engagements or relationships with clients. And those sort of hidden small moments really do have tangible results, and I do believe positive tangible results. And so to this day, I do often at work with my coworkers use the term, in my gut, I feel this. And, the team does take it seriously, because, thinking through strategies and concepts and decisions, I obviously don't just rely on my intuition or my gut. Curiosity is that gut check for my gut. And, my team is comfortable with me, but I question, I analyze. We want to get that logical data. We want to use the sort of what's the lay of the land, so that we can be firm in our original feeling, especially if it goes against norms or conventions, or we're encouraging clients to really push it. But, those sort of, that curiosity really helps me feel confident about what I'm fighting for. And that's kind of been the main thread of my career so far. But that's my story, and I don't know where it will take me, but that's my story so far. So thank you for listening.
That was fantastic.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Yeah, you see, everyone's got a smile on their face.
Aw,
Yeah.
good.
No, I love that. It's especially the just listening to yourself. And I think as women sometimes, and I'm sure everybody has a taste of this, but that whole imposter syndrome, or not being sure if I'm where I am, should be, and just questioning, which on the other side is curiosity, just keeping it going. So I love that, and I think it is crucial that we rely on it. And sometimes it's hard to listen to your gut, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you are doing it. And I think that I wouldn't have confidence about it if I didn't practice it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that you called it a muscle too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Aruna, for telling your story. We'll have Q&A at the end.
Sorry, I saw someone's comment. I wish I could too see my old Alta Vista Modest Mouse tribute website. That would be awesome.
Maybe you can go to the Wayback Machine.
Oh, I am going to do that.
You should totally
That's
try
a good
it.
idea. Yes, I'm going to. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, well, our next storyteller is Emily Bowman. Hey, I first met Emily when she was interviewing after finishing grad school at U of M in the School of Information. And she came in, we were at Organic at the time, and she made everything better. And that's just who she is. I've known her for almost 10 years, and we've worked together at a couple different agencies and became dear friends outside of work. She's now one of my clients. So Emily is another one of the brilliant women that I've worked with that has that sparkle that I was talking about. And Nina Baracco, a UX designer on our Detroit design team, is going to introduce Emily.
Thanks, Alice. So I first met Emily at a Ladies at UX meetup nearly a year ago now. And as you may know, many of you may know, Emily's pretty well known and respected throughout the UX community. So I certainly didn't expect her to be at this event. But she was there and we had a brief conversation that night. And I was, my first impression of her was that she isn't the type of leader who's inaccessible or simply a name. I was really impressed by her approachability and her candor and her willingness to share any UX insight. And I was fortunate to be able to get to know her a little bit more through this event. And so I'm guessing many of you probably know some of Emily's professional achievements, but I thought I'd share some things that we talked about that I thought were great and interesting personal sort of facts about her. Like growing up, she wanted to be an architect, inspired by many hours drawing and planning houses for Barbies to live in. And she's also a career changer. So having previously worked in higher ed as a teacher and a program director for student affairs. So I was thinking, like, what do Barbie houses and higher ed and UX have in common? And probably not a lot from first thought, but I started thinking about it more. And to me, it's obvious that whether she's planning comfortable housing for her dolls or helping students navigate college or being an engaging member of the local UX scene, it's clear that she's a caring leader and she's invested in making experiences better for those around her and building up her community. So happy to introduce Emily.
Thanks, Nina. It makes me giggle as I think back to like all the schematics that I would draw for my Barbies when I was little. And, they bear kind of a lot of resemblance to some of the artifacts that I've produced throughout my career too. So that's the line I see. But so when Alice asked about, can you come and tell a story about curiosity? I think the thing that occurred to me or that came to my mind was like, curiosity is like the fuel for human-centered design, right? And kind of marinating on that for a bit, a story that I think of from my career that really highlights that and how and shows the power of curiosity in the work that I've done as an experienced designer. As a project I worked on fairly early in my career. So this was, let's say, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So I spent the first few years of my UX career working in agencies, and the first one being Organic, which is where I met Alice and Graciela and Caroline also I saw was on this call. So it's kind of like a reunion. But if you've ever worked in an agency environment, you know that the design process is fairly standardized. It's often multidisciplinary, and there's a pretty defined process that that project teams will go through to develop an experience. And so I'd spent a couple of years doing that and really developing my skills and my methods for user experience design, in that kind of environment. And I had chosen to relocate. I wanted to get out of Michigan and try a new place. So I moved with my husband out to Portland, Oregon, and took a job at a boutique UX firm. And when I say boutique firm, I mean like there were 12 of us. It was tiny. And so how work was done there was very different because it wasn't big enough to really be truly multidisciplinary. We had some folks that were focused on research, and we had folks that were focused a little bit more on the design side. But when you took a project, you pretty much did everything. You were kind of like primary client contact, and you really led the work. And the part of the thing that had attracted me to that company and in that role was they were doing, sorry, my dog is like laying here dreaming, and I think she's barking at another dog. Anyways, the work that they were focused on was product design and innovation particularly. And so a lot of the clients that they worked with were innovation labs at a number of different companies. Which that intrigued me. I had spent most of my time up until that point, designing web and mobile experiences for, often in marketing agencies, right, where we're really trying to market a brand and enable, sales and experiences for brands. So it was a different kind of work. And so I'm there, maybe 2 weeks. I get assigned to be the lead for a project with Intel, who was one of the firm's core clients, that was focused on the quantified self movement, which if you're not familiar, I'm not really quite sure if this community of folks really exists anymore. But if you think back, 7 or 8 years ago, this was before a lot of all the devices in our lives had made sense of all the data they were creating in our lives. And so, there was a smaller group of folks who were really interested in leveraging devices and applications that existed on phones and other places to track, data about their lives, right? So it could be their diets, their exercise habits, any number of things, that may go on in a given day, and that for different purposes, right? And so the ask from the client, what they were trying to achieve was build a software platform and software application that would help, these people make sense of all this data that they were collecting about themselves, and their Fitbit data and things they may be tracking in a spreadsheet, and a variety of different sources that were kind of commonly in use around that time. And their role, the reason why they were doing this was to help develop algorithms and data models for use in that application, but also in other potential uses, of the technologies and things that Intel develops for consumer products and many other things. So the thing that was unique about this, this project, from my perspective, is I was used to working with clients who were business owners or marketing staff, and the clients that I was working with Intel were computer scientists themselves. And so that's a very different mindset, and they were kind of approaching the project and approaching the work as inventors and as co-collaborators. And so that was somewhat challenging for me, and kind of flipped the approach I wanted to take on its head. The other dynamic was that these were probably the smartest people I had ever met in my entire life. My primary client, his name was Pete, was the guy who designed Stephen Hawking's chair and communication device. So, very intimidated by this group of clients. And I was basically the only one. There wasn't a team of account directors and project managers to help me work through this project with them. I was kind of sink or swim on my own. So I initially approached the project from what I had learned and what I felt was very successful in the work that I had done previously at the agencies I'd come from, and really tried to lean on that in kind of laying out the plan and the approach for this project. And so I thought, okay, sat down, had a kickoff meeting with the clients, essentially laid out, okay, we're going to start with requirements workshops. And so scheduled half-day workshop where we're getting together to whiteboard and things like that, but also lay out and get really clear on, well, what does this application need to do? What does this project need to be successful for? And I think I knew about 30 minutes in to this half-day workshop that this was not the right approach, just given the way that the conversation tended to go. And I was used to working with clients who really kind of knew what they wanted to achieve out of a project, and kind of had a set of clear goals, whether they were business goals or perceived customer goals or whatever it was. I was used to there being a lot more certainty around the ask, and it became really clear right away that this wasn't that kind of situation. So we spun a little bit initially, and a lot of the things that we were capturing throughout the workshop, it was very technical. If you think about building a data analysis tool, which is essentially, the high level goal we were going after, a lot of the stuff that it had to do is very technical and, detailed around dealing with data. And so, starting from a place of requirements, it was really clear, why would anyone want to do this? Why would anyone want to use this? Who would want to go through all of this work just to figure out the relationship between their Fitbit steps and their sleep patterns or something like that, right? So I remember feeling very kind of deflated after that session and not really sure where to go. I had wanted to move kind of straight into ideation exercises and things like that with the work, and it was clear the purpose for this thing wasn't I just didn't have the information that I needed really to design something that I thought was going to be useful for people. And so I kept kind of coming back to that question of why would anyone do this? So I had, I went to Michigan for graduate school at the University of Michigan School of Information. And anyone who is a fellow alum knows that you take a class there called contextual design. And so I had some experience, doing a contextual research study. And so, that came to mind as, okay, well, maybe I just need to find these people. It's a very niche audience that has a very, particular interest in doing this kind of thing. Let me go where these people are. And so it's funny, Nita, you included in my introduction, but I love meetups. And so that was the first place that I looked is, well, there's a community of these people. Let me go out and find them. So I found a local meetup, a quantified self meetup, and went to a couple of meetings that they had. And this was not like the meetups that I was used to going to in the UX community. It was, 8 people in a library conference room. But I learned a ton about, who they were, what motivated them, the kinds of things they were measuring, why they were looking at that data in the way that they were, and the kinds of things they wished that they could do, right? That they were building their own workarounds for in order to achieve, their goals with the data that they were tracking. So I went to several of those, met people and talked to them, a lot about their projects and experiments and things that they were running. And then I spent a weekend down in San Francisco at a conference, actually, that happens every year. Actually, I don't know if it still happens every year, but at the time it did, for this same community. And the kinds of folks that you might imagine would be there from that local community. Folks who really are nerding out on data and their own data were at this conference, and a lot of case studies presented, and these are folks who were building out services like 23andMe. Met a handful of people from Apple, and a couple of the large companies who now today likely contributed to some of the services we just have at our fingertips to make sense out of the data that they collect, about our lives as we go. So, learned a ton from that, and was able to essentially uncover, through empathy, through inquiry, through observation, how these particular people, worked with the data about their lives. We had some people who were motivated by that, really trying to make behavioral modifications. So like that, you can only manage what you measure kind of mentality. So, trying to make improvements in their diet or their exercise or whatever the case is. There were people who were very keyed in on like solving some kind of mystery. Most of those folks tended to be like it was often a health concern, trying to find correlations and relationships between, different data sets about their lives to figure out why something is happening to them. And then there were a portion of people who did it almost like because the data was like memories about their lives, and it was a way to kind of capture what happened to them in their life, and record that for posterity or whatever the case may be. So I don't think I ever would have gotten to that kind of delineation in motivations. Those three categories ended up, we ended up translating that into some archetypes. I didn't use personas necessarily as a tool from there. I rather translated those into a set of archetypes, and then designed the system around, how do we enable, because, each archetype had different goals of what they were trying to achieve. And there was motivation from, from intel, from kind of, from the business owner, I guess you could say, to help move customers kind of across some of those motivations in order to help develop some of these algorithms and data models and things. And I don't think I ever would have gotten to the place of identifying, those different archetypes and designing the system around them in the way that we did, that was successful, without that activity, that kind of generative research activity. Testing with users is, something that was absolutely going to be baked into the process. But that is a bit of a, kind of a reactive way of gathering input, right, in throughout the design process. And this approach really, I think, got me to a much better solution in the end. So I think that was one of the first projects that really helped me understand how powerful, just following a natural curiosity for why someone behaves in the way that they do, in order to land on a successful design. And I think something else that project taught me was, not to approach, user experience design from a formulaic kind of perspective, like that every project has to kind of go through the same phases, or has to have the same kind of activities or same methods, but rather, kind of pull the right method for the task at hand and for the problem you're trying to solve. And that's going to tend to be more effective than kind of a pattern that you're always, trying to apply to every single project. So it was a kind of one of the key projects in my memory or in my experience that I think has really influenced how I practice as an experience designer. And yeah, it was was a good one to reflect on, I think, and share with you guys. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, that was great, Emily. And I really took away from that too, is that not getting stuck in having a way to do something, can be really rewarding, and you can get a lot more out of that. And you learned that through the project that you were on. Because sometimes, I'm sure we've all been in those situations where it's like, no, this should work the way that it works. But the flexibility and just being, eternally curious on what's the right thing to do, I think, it serves us all really well. So I think that was a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we'll have questions at the end. And the next storyteller that we have is Summer. And I met Summer when we both worked on the Ford account at Team Detroit /GTB. And she doesn't know this story, but I had heard her name in hushed reverence for weeks when we were prepping for a commercial shoot of a new vehicle, but I'd never met her, and she hadn't been able to be in any of the meetings that I'd been in. So one day I was in a meeting and she buzzed right in, and you'll see in a minute, she buzzes, and brought with her so much positive energy that I immediately understood why everyone had been talking about her the way that she had. So I knew she'd be perfect for this. She's got a different, she'll tell you what she does and how she got where she is. And when I saw her for the first time yesterday, and it's been a long time since I've seen her, there was no mistaking that her energy and sparkle, and I'm sure you're going to feel the same when she starts talking. Marilyn Cannell is a visual designer in our team in Detroit, and she's going to introduce you to Summer.
Thanks, Alice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Summer is a freelance executive producer, and she has over 20 years of experience at many companies. And like Alice said, GTB is one of them, as well as Campbell Ewald. She has some awesome big names on her client roster, including McDonald's, Chevy, Ford, OnStar, and the Navy, and that's just naming a few. Outside of her work, you can find her dedicating time to helping promote peace in the Middle East, and that rhymes, so that's kind of cool. And she currently resides in Birmingham, Michigan, with her husband and 2 kids. And she told us she has tons of stories she could share. So I'm excited to hear what one she picks to share. So go ahead, Summer.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn. Can you guys see me? You think as head of production, I'd have the lighting right, but I've already failed you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Rightpoint and the lovely Alice for having me. It's really fun and an honor to be here with all these other amazing women. So thank you for that. And speaking of amazing women, I want to do one unskippable ad real quick, and that is the amazing woman Jocelyn Benson, who's our Secretary of State, and my sister-in-law, who's running and is at the front of voter rights right now and voter registration and how we can get our ballots in and counted fairly, etc. So go vote. That's and if you get nothing out of my whole talk today except that, I will find that as a successful 15 minutes. So it's really important right now. It's more crucial than ever, I think, to vote. And so especially as women, I think right now, go out and vote. So there's that, earned media. So yeah, I do. I have a lot of stories. And I even asked the ladies, like, where do I begin? It's like asking somebody what their favorite movie is. But I think once I started thinking about it and circled back, I wanted to talk about when I was 17 and my father and I were asked to be in a documentary. I was actually told I was going to be in one. I wasn't even asked. My dad was asked. And because my dad is a Palestinian refugee. And so I grew up kind of in this world of, peace in the Middle East and around the organization he founded, Access, and just into restorative justice. So this documentary it was a cultural documentary about how one transfers their culture, their ethics, their language, food, you name it, over to their American-born kids. And so my dad and I were kind of at the front of this. And I didn't know what to expect, but in walks a woman, and she's the director. And just by her presence and my first impression with her and how she handled herself, and she wasn't even remotely connected to this culture that she was going to make a documentary about, but seeing how she handled her questions with us and her open-mindedness to if we gave her maybe some tips on what to do, or maybe we should talk to this person, that she was very open, and how, you know, she handled the crew and last minute locations, and even just the other people in the documentary and their cultural barriers, and how she treated that all with respect. I just, you know, that was my first taste of production. And I was a freshman in college at Michigan State. And so I would come home every weekend, and they followed me for about a year, me and my dad. And so, you know, I'm thinking, well, within this year, and she's following me to, you know, my dad and I, to lectures and protests and brothers football games at Berkeley High School. And, you know, I'm thinking to myself, how is she gonna take this? And then these stories that I have, like, you know, I had the earliest curfew in high school history. So, and I'm Summer with 1M, like, how is this gonna all make sense into a documentary? You know, it seemed asinine. And I just thought how interesting this could be. So fast forward, I am a sophomore at Michigan State, and I'm in a sociology class, and the syllabus gets handed out, and Tales from Arab Detroit is on the syllabus. And I was just like, oh shit, you know, am I excited? Am I horrified? What do I do? So that was like my first real moment of using my personal experience and my knowledge to maybe, you know, do something or channel a different way of communication. So I stayed after class, and I told my professor that I'm in this documentary, and she said, oh, I recognize you, you know, your hair's longer. I was like, great. So from there, you know, I spoke in that sociology class, and then it kind of trickled, and I became this poster child of this documentary. And I spoke at colleges across the states, went to the Smithsonian, and it really wasn't about even me talking in all these places. What I really got out of it was listening to other people's personal experiences, and the curiosity I had at their stories, even why they were there listening to me, what brought them there, and then hearing their stories. And that really opened up so much for me, in a sense of, it led me to, you know, to have more stories myself, right? And it led me to make friendships and a network that I probably wouldn't have had without these interactions and without this curiosity and open-mindedness, and to really listen to other people's personal experiences and their stories. And I wanted to tell you a few of those stories because they're funny as hell. So I'm sitting at a bar at Michigan State, and one of the owners of the bar, his friend is there, and he comes up to me. He's a middle-aged African-American man, sweet as pie, and he just starts talking to me. So I start talking back, and he's talking about my schooling and what I'm doing, and what I'm studying. It was like medical anthropology, and then he was telling me how he went to University of Southern California, and he wasn't that great at school, but he kept it up with it, and he played sports. And then at the end of our conversation, he said, what are you doing Saturday? And at first I was like, this is kind of creepy. But then I realized he wasn't asking like that, right? He was just, you know, like curious what I was doing on Saturday. And he said he followed with that his assistant was ill and couldn't travel to Michigan, and he needed an assistant at the football game. So I said, all right. He gave me a number, and I called that number, and they just basically said, meet at the Breslin Center, at the football field outside. You'll see a lot of satellite trucks. You'll see one with a flag that says ABC Sports, and go in there and ask for Jared. So I did. And the next thing I know, he was Lynn Swan, which is he's a famous football player. And I became his assistant, you know, after that day. I was on the field with him, and I kind of just told him when he had to go to commercial. And I was in that like live production world, and I got such a high off of it. And like hearing his story and Peter Jackson's story, I didn't know who any of these people are. And my boyfriend at the time was like, I don't know if I should break up with you because you have no idea who these people you're meeting are, and you should, or, you know, it was really funny. So that conversation with him that night opened up a whole new window for me. And I started working for ESPN, and then I went into car racing, and then I jumped into advertising, and it really just, it helped me in hearing everyone's, you know, job descriptions and what they're doing really brought me to realize what I like to do, which is production, and basically be the linchpin between everybody. You know, there's some days where I have to figure things out all day long, all the time, real time. And then there's some days where I'm just helping other people figure things out, you know? So, but it's fun. It is fun. So, another story is, fast forward, I was at the right place at the right time, I think. And a person that was heading up Navy was no longer there, and they needed someone to do this next Navy job, which was for the Riverines and the Navy, the SEALs, right? So, you know, I just happened to be standing there and looking at my boss, and he's like, well, hey, do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. So I saw some reservation in his face, like, you know, there's going to be live ammo, there's going to be boats and waters and ticks, and, you know, and I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, it didn't faze me. Like, sure, I'm going to do this. And I had a couple meetings with the Navy, and I had a couple meetings with production companies, and I listened to everybody, and hearing one production company in particular, I could tell that they would hear the Navy loud and clear, and that the Navy would hear this production company loud and clear, and it would be a great match. So in the end, I came back with something nobody expected. It went up to the CEO the day I brought it back, and I think people were a little surprised, but it was my moment of like, you know, not I told you so, or not I'm better than that, what you thought, but it was just a payoff to myself that hearing people out and listening to people and what they're curious about, you know, can really make a connection. And that production company and that in the Navy have had a long lasting relationship since then. And that to me was really great, you know? So I think, you know, in the end, that little documentary that I was embarrassed to be in at 17 kind of made me realize, like, if you listen and remain curious, it'll leave you to like an open mind, an open heart, and it will give you a sense of individual leadership and how you work, and it'll shape the way you do things as in business, but also and as a human being. And that's it. That's why I love this panel, because I get to hear everyone else's stories.
It was fantastic. And you know what, Summer, I didn't know you worked on Navy, because I worked on Navy too. I did the website redesign. That's so funny. So we must have been at Camp Believable at the same time too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
That's
funny.
great. Yeah.
And I've heard of Access too. I didn't, so your dad was one of the founders of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of grew up in that world. It was, and just met some crazy people, just through that and that organization. I'm still involved in a lot of that. So it's really,
Yeah, that's
been a
really
good ride. Yeah,
exciting and rewarding for sure.
definitely.
Well, thank you so much for that. Those stories were great. And Lynn Swan, I mean, you've been at the right place. It's like Forrest Gump. You remember? He's always in the right place at the right time.
Summer. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for sharing that story with us.
Thank you.
So we're rounding out our 4 storytellers, and Graziella Jackson is our final storyteller. And I met Graziella, I couldn't remember if it was 2011 or 2012. And we both worked at the same agency, and we were both working on Volkswagen. And she was our woman on the ground with Caroline, who I see is on here too, in Virginia. So at the time, she was playing more of an account role, but it only took like 2 seconds to realize that she could pretty much do everything. And I'm sure everybody on here would agree. And I loved hearing her stories about how she always wanted to be a playwright. And she's done, I mean, I'm following her on Instagram, not just for her garden, but also all other things that she shows. And she's done so many interesting and amazing things in her relatively short existence. And she always manages to do something that looks amazingly fun and interesting. So Camille Cheryl Bloom, I hope I pronounced that right, she's a strategist in our Detroit office, and she's going to introduce you to Graziella.
Great, thank you, Alice. So like Alice said, our final storyteller this evening is now upon us. She's a creative force in many forms, including, like we've heard, her English gardens, which a few on the call tonight have dubbed the most beautiful backyard on Instagram. She uses her skills to help social sector organizations meaningfully engage constituents with advanced digital practices and tools. Graziella Jackson loves to create a space where people feel creatively alive and reconnected with their imagination. As partner and CEO, she oversees Echo & Co.'s work in sharing human-centered design with clients who want to better understand digital and produce more effective results, particularly within nonprofit and philanthropic organizations, social and civic tech startups, and the educational technology field. Along with her incredible work with Echo & Co., she's also an accomplished playwright. She describes her work in a way that I absolutely love, having an unrelenting discord with an undercurrent of sweetness and hope. She was recently named Playwright in Residence with the Keegan Theater in DC, and is also on the board of the Washington Improv Theater, also in DC, where she works to bring improv to all kinds of organizations who want to reimagine their collaborative cultures in a virtual world. Please welcome Graziella.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Alice. I was so excited to be invited. First off, just to have the opportunity to do this, but then I saw Emily and Aruna were here, and I've worked with you in the past, and Alice as well, and I saw Caroline and Stacy and Imani and a whole bunch of folks in the chat that I've gotten the chance to talk to. So it was just really nice to be here. And when that happened, I realized that I think the story I needed to tell was one about the power of female collaboration, because it's so important, especially in the design field that Alice talked about in the beginning, being so male dominated, to find a way to find thought partners and collaborators and other women that you can build up and that can help build up you. And that becomes really important part of your journey. As Alice and Camille mentioned, I have two roles that heavily rely on curiosity. In playwriting, I think your job is to use curiosity to tell a story that deeply investigates the human experience in a way that makes an audience go through that human experience, so then they can be curious about their own relationship with that. And so that is a really powerful application, and it's similar in design. You sort of have to use curiosity to create a human experience that people engage with that hopefully will somehow meaningfully change their impression of, you know, what they're experiencing in that moment. So they're actually, even though they seem very different, they're similar disciplines. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Washington Improv Theater work. I got involved there because I wanted to believe in curiosity as a practice that could be strengthened over time. And I think the world of improvisation is curiosity in its purest form, because it is people showing up to create in the moment with no preconceived notions, with a prompt that they have no idea what is going to be given to them. And in my work through Washington Improv Theater, they actually have a whole program where they do workforce trainings and development with people like the FBI and the NSA, who are the most improvisational people in the world, as you can imagine. Just kidding, they're the least. But the idea is that you can use these techniques to improve people's ability to tap into their imagination and use that well in a lot of environments. And there are 3 concepts in that work that WIT teaches that are a part of the improv world. One is the notion of you have to let go. In order to be able to create something new, you have to start by letting go. Then you have to notice more. So you have to prime yourself through curiosity to notice more in your environment that can be useful to you. And then the third is use everything. So you have to use everything at your disposal to be creative. And if you can master those 3 things, then you're doing a pretty good job. And there's a fourth one, the fourth concept, which is I've got your back. And that basically means that you have to create curiosity in shared environments with other people to truly bring about the best possible thing. So I wanted to create a story that talks about female connection, the importance of it, and to use just a very small, specific moment in time where I had to let go, notice more, and use everything. And because I'm a playwright, I'm going to do it in the form of a play. All right. So this was not the first time I found myself dreading a class that was just about to begin. This particular one was my 3rd year of a pretty reputable acting conservatory in DC that I somewhat stumbled into a couple of years prior. Before that, it had been a group guitar class, an extreme noveling class, essay writing, short story writing, screenwriting. I took Tai Chi. I took knife skills. I took playwriting, web design, documentary filmmaking, art classes, Brazilian dance, you get it. It was always the same, though, that start of class dread. So I don't belong here. What am I doing here? This is crazy. I'm going to fail. Everybody knows it. Why did I even sign up to begin with? I should quit. That's a lot of doubt for day one, for actually any day, but for day one, but it's pretty common. And I've come to discover that that's a type, especially among some designers. If we were a song, we might go something like, when you're weary and feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, take a class. So now there's a difference between taking and finishing classes, or taking and enjoying classes, because taking doesn't actually guarantee those other things. And that's why dropping out is so common, at least in my experience. But I had managed to make it through 2 acting classes into a 3rd class, and that was progress for me. Not enough to eliminate the dread, but progress. And like on most first class days, I got there a little early, which always helped me ease my nerves a little. And as people started trickling in, I realized I knew about half the students. And I was not a seasoned actor or aspiring actor or even a good actor. I was a designer who had terrible stage fright, and it was really starting to affect my work. And, you know, for whatever reason, I had survived 2 acting classes prior, so I figured I could survive a 3rd. And in that moment, design was my calling, so I didn't really feel like I had an option not to do it, but to keep going, I really had to take the hesitant, insecure, constantly self-evaluating side of myself and maybe learn a little bit of trust. And I also had to reconnect with things like being present and finding gifts and enjoyment in what I was doing and being vulnerable and like all of those other great things you can learn from Brene Brown and TED Talks. So in class, none of the actors ever seemed to notice that I was a total imposter, which was nice, and I did like sweat a lot and I wore dark colors, so they really couldn't tell, but I always felt nervous. I never felt natural, always. But I also realized I could play at acting and learn so many useful things for design and presenting, especially like body awareness and breath control and letting go of hangups and preconceptions, and then go to my day job and be better at things like presenting and facilitating and all the things that designers who want to be leaders and inevitably end up having to do. Because honestly, it's just acting by another name and with different material. So back to that day in class, my friend Anderson, who's this like 6 foot something, gorgeous monument of a person, an artist with this like really smooth, deep voice, came up to me. He kind of like theater shouted my name, like Grazie. And he followed it by like the kind of hug that just like squeezes the dread out of you. That's all how I can describe it. And he goes, BTW, I've got a friend for you. And behind him was this like green-eyed, massively smiling, gently blonde woman about my age and height, who was just kind of lurking. And he goes, Rebecca, grazie, grazie, Rebecca, y'all take it from here. So I don't exactly remember what happened next, but I know we exchanged phone numbers, and I was worried about whether or not she might end up being a crazy person, because aren't we all? And I didn't know. And she was in a theater class, so who knew, who knew? But, and I have no idea what she was thinking about me at the time, other than probably like my hair was really big and would have been an asset to her when she was growing up in North Carolina, because that has come up a few times since. When I met her mom, Marty, for the first time, she looked at me and then she looked back at Rebecca and then she looked at me and then she looked back at Rebecca and she goes, Rebecca, if you had had her hair, you might have been more social. So hair was like a thing in her house. But on that first day of class, I wasn't thinking too much about that part of first impressions. To be honest, I was more worried about looking like a fool in general. But time went on and things were pretty good. I did okay in the class. And week by week, Rebecca seemed more normal. She laughed easily. She knew everything about theater. She was the kind of actor that made me want to eat like loads of popcorn while she was performing. She was just so good at what she was doing. And she always said things to me like, you're so smart and funny. You really know how to read a play. I love your mind. I love your ideas. I want to spend more time with you. All these things, like I had never had a female friend actually say to me before, not a new one. So I was intrigued by this new friend, and a few months of class passed and we got closer. We had a lot of similarities, the way we approached the world. Somewhere in there, I took a trip to South Africa and Rebecca went home to North Carolina to get married. So we didn't see each other for a while, and then class ended and summer came and I didn't see her for a much longer period of time. And then one weekday afternoon that she called me just kind of quite out of the blue, and it was our first real out of class contact. So I was like, okay, now we're getting real. This person's calling me outside of class, and now's the moment. She said she was in my neighborhood for work and she had a break and she wanted to meet me for lunch. So I was like thinking cautiously. I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And I told her I would be up for it. Only that morning I had had a root canal, and so half my face was numb and immobile. And I told her like, maybe we should meet another day when I didn't look like a drooling Picasso. And that was all true. I wasn't lying to get out of lunch with this person I was slightly scared of, but also intrigued by. And she laughed and said, kind of like, look, I know I just met you. This may sound creepy, but I'm new to the area. And we hung out in class and the class ended. And I said to myself, this person is the shit and I want to be her friend. And I don't do that often with very many people. And frankly, I don't care that your face is saggy and droopy and that you've had a root canal and you look like Picasso and that you're drooling. I just want to have lunch with you so we can be friends and talk and gorge on delicious food like pizza, and just be friends. And so I was convinced. And so I met her and we picked a restaurant near me and I was there in about 10 minutes. We sat and we ordered, and then we just talked for 4 hours. It was crazy. It was like layers upon layers of conversation poured out of us about art, being a woman in your mid-30s, our bodies, life, our careers, our callings, the world, her past, my past, our husbands, why pizza is so damn good, why pizza is so damn bad, just like pure unrestricted connection and curiosity. And we ended up staying until the evening wait staff basically like chased us off. And then we realized our husbands might call to file missing persons reports. And we kind of joked, we were like, well, if you've been there long enough that tea's turned into wine, then generally it's probably time to go. So we wrapped that day up. Over the next year of knowing Rebecca, I realized I had found something pretty precious and rare, a creative soulmate and a collaborator who was a woman, someone who was smart and courageous and curious and pretty remarkable, and someone who could blend her passions and experiences and ideas with mine and bring about beautiful new things. And I had felt that as a designer, that had always eluded me. I think first, because I was often in the company of men. Second, because the environment was often so competitive, like in a hyper masculine way, that it felt like aggressive and stressful and a total killer of curiosity. And I was intimidated by it. And then third, because I never really thought to seek out that often, like, or seek out, you know, female collaboration and companionship, because I think the women who were above me were often preoccupied with staying there and staying relevant because they had to fight to keep their roles. And then me and the women adjacent to me were often preoccupied with proving our value so we could move up into those scarce and coveted roles. And the women junior to me were sort of vying for space and to be seen. And all of that is very stressful. And all of that because as a woman designer, you're in a man's world. And I think that's changing now, but probably not fast enough. And I had found some, you know, some opportunities for connection, but not like this. And I had always kind of thought that as a woman and one moving up higher in the ranks of design leadership, that I had to be kind of like fiercely independent and likely also comfortable under the constant wings of male mentors. But I feel like with Rebecca, all that changed. That year of getting to know each other was pretty amazing. I finally had a person to bounce ideas off of who was interested in just the raw stuff of me, and likewise me for her. We ate a lot more pizza. I had a few more teeth fixed. We took more classes. We wrote plays together. We took trips together. It wasn't all perfect, but it was pretty damn great. And all the while this was happening, our professional lives were falling apart. Rebecca, who had always been an actor, had recently left a role as a company player in a Southern Virginia theater. And she had taken a few auditions in DC, but she was struggling to try and establish herself in a new and fairly insular theater city. And then just before meeting Rebecca, I was laid off from a design job that Alice mentioned, that had me splitting time between DC and Detroit. And I was in a brand new job working to set up a user experience design practice in a small company that was focused on social change, which I, like Aruna, also love. And at that time, the founder and key leader abruptly left the entire company unmoored and completely in the hands of kind of ill-prepared secondary leaders. The one strong female collaborator I had there, who was Aruna's Jessica Teal. So Jessica Teal factors heavily in these stories. She's still a good friend to this day, and she also left at that time. And so I was there. I was also kind of unmoored, and my days started to seesaw, honestly, between fight and flight. So stay and fight to bring great design to important progressive and social causes that I loved, or leave and likely go back to designing in a more corporate, maybe male-dominated setting. And I really didn't want to go back to the second kind of work. Rebecca was in the same place. She felt her acting life coming to a close, but she wasn't certain how to leave it behind, and she didn't really want to deal with the rat race of auditions and what also was a very male-dominated industry. We talked about it over and over and over and over again, sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and tea and wine and reading things like Shakespeare and Greek tragedy and absurdism for our classes, reading things from my plays, and honestly just being present with and for each other, which is the most important part. She encouraged me to keep going and to step up into leadership and use what she called a blend of curiosity, resourcefulness, and resilience to turn the company around. And eventually I did. I took the role as CEO of the company, even though it was troubled. It was a terrifying step. And I just kind of worked my way through it day by day. And I have to say, I also kind of called her almost daily on my commute to just like trade ideas, because she had become the person to me who was my go-to collaborator, and who was probably the most curious person I had ever met about the world. At work, when I felt like an imposter, I think about her advice and her encouragement all the time. She was like there in the back of my head giving me advice. I also started to seek in my other colleagues the qualities I had found in Rebecca and she had found in me. So things like connection and humor and openness and compassion, resilience, resourcefulness, and of course, curiosity. And then I just started noticing it in myself and others more and more, and realized it was a thing that you could bring out of people and of the environment if you put in the right curiosity and energy. So that became more exciting. And I started looking for strong, curious women to bring into our company and work as staff and leadership and partners, just people who sought this approach in their work and life and could support each other. Around that same time I was shifting, Rebecca also was. She was close to finishing the conservatory. I dropped out, even though I was going to stick with it to the end. I got a quarter of the way through the last class of the conservatory and dropped out, but it's okay. I was taking over a company, so I guess maybe someday I'll go back. But she stayed and she finished, but she still wasn't certain that acting was her calling. And so during one brunch we had, I just mentioned the Japanese concept of ikigai. For those who know it, it's the concept that to find true happiness in life, you need to do something that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that you can get paid for. And so I just asked her if that was acting, and she said she didn't know. But by the end of the Eggs Benedict, we decided that I would write and Rebecca would perform in a one-woman show for DC's Fringe Festival that next summer. And it would either be her final performance, to bring closure to her acting career and help her move on, or it would be a way to unblock her, to kind of renew her calling as an artist and launch her performance career in DC and hopefully beyond. And of the 8 story ideas I suggested, she rejected only one. And despite her initial hesitation to that, we both knew that that one was probably her play. So about 2 months ago, after COVID, Rebecca was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroendocrine cancer in her lungs, her vertebrae, all over her body. And that's the kind of moment that makes you think. It's also the kind of moment that asks you how you're going to proceed, because you can't design your way out of that. It's like a thing you really can't design your way out of. And I think we've both leaned on the things that she had taught me, the concepts of resilience, resourcefulness, and curiosity. Through all of this, I've never really stopped believing in the power of shared curiosity and soulful collaboration among women, among anyone really, but especially women, to help change your life and the world. And I think this is the power that women bring to design and to each other, and why it's so important for us to find and be with one another in meaningful ways. I feel like I owe my knowledge of all of this to my Rebecca, who I'm so glad I found in this life. And I truly hope that each and every one of you finds yours. Thank you.
It was so beautiful. It was fantastic. I know.
We should clap.
Yeah. That was beautiful. There were so many pieces to that I could go on and on about, but I feel you. And all the women that have spoken tonight and told their stories, I mean, I feel like you all have, I want you to know that you've touched me in the same way. And even though it was funny, because Graciela, I was telling her I had a cup that she left at our office like 8 years ago. And every time I pull that cup out, I think about her. And I hadn't talked to her in years, but it was in my mind and in my heart, we were still connected. So this has been a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you so much for that story. Sure. And so now we have time for Q&A. It's about 8:30. If anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat and we can go through them. let's see if we come up with any. And I want to thank everyone for spending this evening with us. And we hope the stories have touched you. I know they've touched me quite a bit, or they've inspired you or given you something to think about. So let me see if are there any questions in the chat. Nope, I don't see any, but everyone's saying thank you to everyone sharing their stories. This has been really great. And I didn't know what to expect, but I love the idea of people telling stories because it's much more than just having a conversation. It's, you know, goes a little bit deeper. So if we don't have any questions, I want to tell everyone thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us out.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
us.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
So much. Nice meeting you, ladies.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
too.
Definitely.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again.